Yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 yai lai lai lai. Yai lai yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 lai. Lai lai. Yai lai lai yai lai lai lai. Yai lai lai yai lai lai lai. Yai lai lai yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 lai. Yai lai lai yai lai lai. Yai lai 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 yai lai 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 lai. Boker Tov, good morning, Moadim L'Simcha. May these days of Pesach bring joy and strength and renewal and healing in this season. This week we continue to work our way through the second section of the morning service. This section is called Psukei de Zimra, or the Psalms of Praise, which is pretty much what it is. Psalms of praise that set our kavanah, our intention for the day, toward generosity and compassion and gratitude. And so this morning we're going to mark the main section of Psukei de Zimra, which is known as the daily Hallel. Hallel is a series of psalms we say on holidays, including this Pesach holiday. But the daily Hallel is recited every morning, and daily Hallel is made up of the final 6 Psalms in the book of Psalms, Psalms 145, 146, 47, 48, 49, and Psalm 150. So this morning, Psalm 145, the first of those. It is also the best known. It's known by the first word in this psalm, which is Ashrei. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. How happy are those who dwell in your house. It's an acrostic, which is to say each line begins with a letter of the Hebrew alphabet, starting with Aleph, the first letter of the alphabet, and going to Taf. This is a way that Hebrew poetry essentially says what we use in the colloquial. It covers everything from A to Z. It's a way of saying that this is all encompassing. And the interesting thing about this acrostic, among others, is that it is missing one letter, the letter Nun. There are lots of commentaries on that. Sages point to various unfortunate words that begin with Nun and say, Nun is not a letter of happiness, so it's left out. I never really bought that, because pretty much every letter has unfortunate things that begin with it. Most contemporary scholars think there was just a scribal error, and somewhere they lost the Nun verse. We see that because some of the ancient translations indeed have an extra verse. So we don't know for sure. At any rate, the main point is that this speaks of God's presence in our lives and in the life of the world, in all the ways mentioned from A to Z, and we are left to fill in ways that are not specifically mentioned. So a couple of the key lines that speak to me. We'll start with the first one. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, or as we chanted at synagogue at Kavi, Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yehalelucha salah. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They will sing your praise forever. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha. Happy are those who dwell in God's house. Reflect as we think about this verse on what does it mean to be in God's house. Obviously, this is a metaphor. God doesn't have a 3-bedroom home. And we read elsewhere in a line included in Kedusha, Malokol Haaretz B'kvodo. All the world is filled with God's glory. All the world is God's house. So what is the psalmist suggesting it is to dwell in God's house? And is there a kind of physical association with this for you? Are there places where you feel closest to God? I took a drive yesterday out into the South Fork of the Boise River in the canyon there, and I felt like I was in God's house. For me, often it is places in the natural world, but we have different places where we feel closest to God. Maybe it's just sitting somewhere listening to music that you love. Maybe it's the art museum. Maybe God's house is the homeless shelter where you're helping to care for God's people. What are God's houses? Where do you feel you are in God's house? Another related line, Somech Adonai l'chol hanoflim, v'zokef l'chol hakefufim. You support the fallen and raise up those who are bowed down. God is the one who supports the fallen and raises up those who are bowed down, perhaps crushed by the weight of their lives. Note here that the psalm is emphasizing God's care for the most vulnerable in our community. This is how we are held to judgment. An individual, a culture, a community in Jewish tradition are almost always judged by how they treat the most vulnerable in their midst. So just as God supports the fallen and raises up the bowed down, as we sing this, we're asked to emulate God and to do the same. And these words seem especially apt now during this COVID-19 crisis, where we learn more and more with every day as we get more data of how disproportionately this virus is affecting the most vulnerable, as crises usually do. How the rates of the virus are hitting the African American and Latino populations particularly hard. How hard it is on the homeless who don't have the luxury of 6-foot distancing. How hard it is for victims of domestic violence who are shut in with those who abuse them. So our call to help to raise up the fallen as God does. And finally, the line that goes, Poteach et yadecha umaspia lechol chai ratzon. You open your hand and you satisfy and provide nourishment to every living being. The Talmud says that this is the verse around which the entire psalm is formed, is shaped, is founded. That it is by far the most important verse of the psalm because it speaks of God caring for all creatures. It's not just, God cares for me, God cares for my family. It's not just God cares for the Jewish people, the chosen people. It's not just God cares for humanity, for human life and culture. No, it's open your hand and umaspia lechol chai ratzon, care for every living being, for all of creation. And in this time of environmental crisis and degradation, as we worry about and rally to deal with climate change, it's important to remember that God cares for all creation, but again, God needs our help. So we too are called to care for all of God's creation. I also have always enjoyed that first part of the line, Poteach et yadecha, open your hand. For me, this is a kind of control to let go when I may be obsessed and want control. Open your hand is to be open to life, to not try to grasp at things, but to open, to share, to approach life as a gift, and to share the gift, and to not hoard the gift, to release it, and to open myself to what life will bring to me. So I invite you to take a moment and reflect on any of these lines or any other lines that speak with you. In Mishkan Tefillah, Ashrei is on page 52 through 53. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. I'd like to add one more piece with which I'll be ending these meditations for the next, I guess about 46 days. It's traditional between Pesach, the second night of Pesach, and Shavuot to count the Omer. This is a way our tradition makes a connection in biblical times between agricultural seasons, the barley and the wheat harvest. But for us, it's primarily a link between Pesach and Shavuot. Pesach is going out of Egypt, getting freedom. Shavuot is receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, where that freedom finds its fulfillment. And for each of these days, there is a combination of sfirot, of Kabbalistic attributes that inform and shape the day. So I'm going to be sharing blessings from Rabbi Yael Levy's book, Journey Through the Wilderness, a mindfulness approach to the practice of counting the Omer. For today, day 4 is about Netzach Shebegavura, eternity within love. She writes, the transformative act of love and generosity, the acts of kindness that change us and the world, cultivating the commitment to let what we most love, what we most value, guide our actions today. We ask ourselves, When am I acting from fear? When am I acting from anger? What inspires me to act from love? Today is the fourth day of the Omer. Hayom Arba'a Yamim LaOmer. Boker Tov, may your day be filled with endurance, eternity within love. May you open your hand to what life presents to you today.